Welcome back to the place where our crazy dreams seem just a little less crazy. Mark Haney is our Chief Dreaming Officer. He knows the right people, the right tactics, and the right philosophies to win. He is the entrepreneur next door, and this is The Mark Haney Show.
Welcome back. I'm Mark Haney, and today I have the privilege of being joined by Devon Bell. He's our Placer County Sheriff. How you doing, Devon?
I am wonderful. Great to be here.
Thank you for being here, and especially on a show like today where we're thinking back, right? We have the financial crisis was 10 years ago this week. We have 9/11 about 18 years ago. And with you guys have had some crisis in the Placer County law enforcement as well.
We live in crisis, but yeah, over the years, we've certainly had some particularly dark spots that we've had to move through. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. Leadership. We talked about leadership in a time of crisis. Talk to us about what you face every day, and maybe you can even share a story or two about times when you've had to step up and lead.
Okay. We've had, first off, I gotta give a shout out to my folks. I have an amazing group of people that serve an amazing community. We're fortunate enough here where we live, when we roll through a community and we wave, people wave back with all their fingers, and we do appreciate that. We don't take that for granted because it doesn't happen everywhere.
Yeah.
I can tell you, one of the most challenging times, I've had a couple. One right after I took office. I don't think I'll go into that one, but one I think that everybody's familiar with is Mike Davis, one of our deputy sheriffs. I might get emotional about this because I was pretty close with Mike. He lived in my neighborhood, as a matter of fact. And when Mike was killed, that was a tough day for us. And I'll tell you what, I was standing. I was the undersheriff at the time, second in command, and my sheriff stood up there, and we had been pummeled with lots of questions, and including people that saying, "Why didn't you just kill that guy, the suspect? You should have just killed him." And the sheriff very poignantly said, "No, because we're not him." And in a time of crisis, and it's really easy to allow your emotions to take over. You got to stick true to your values. And our values, the core values of the organization, that was not aligned. That was not aligned. So we acted appropriately and professionally, and we handled our business the way we were supposed to, and didn't compromise our values at a time of crisis.
Amazing. Well, thinking about that story, I think I was on my way out of town, heading I think to Paso Robles for a concert or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember going down I-80 at, it must have been late morning and mid-morning, and seeing the massive number of law enforcement heading toward the Reno area, heading up toward Auburn, where you guys ended up with the second victim,
right?
And second law enforcement person that got shot.
Right.
So thinking about how that it rocked our community.
Yes.
So thinking about the leadership, but then beyond that, the next day, I mean, what was the? How does that change a department?
Obviously it was our darkest day, but it also was a springboard to a cultural shift that was part of our brightest sunrise. The initial days were absolutely horrible, but what it did, it also galvanizes people. It brings your team together. It brings the community together, and it makes the community realize, hey, what you do, you guys are prepared to sacrifice for us. Yeah. And I can tell you, rolling through the community as part of our procession when we laid Mike to rest, they and I will get emotional. I'm sorry about that, but the community lined up with American flags, and they had our back. Mm-hmm. And that's not faded. They're still there for us, and we're still there for them. So through crisis, there can absolutely be something special. It was dark, don't get me wrong, it was awful, but some wonderful things grew out of that.
Yeah.
And can
grow up. Great information. I think obviously law enforcement around the country is facing maybe some it's getting some bad press.
Yep.
It's getting there's challenges out there. But when When stuff hits the fan, it's like, who do you want by your side? I always think of that. And I think that's true in entrepreneurship. It's probably true in life, right? You want people by your side that will stick by you. And thinking about culture, so Ed Bonner was the sheriff at that point. You took over shortly thereafter.
Yeah, I took over in 2017, February 2017. The sheriff had a couple of things going on personally, health-wise, and he needed to step away from the pressure. And we had worked so closely together. And again, philosophical alignment, continuity of not only mission, but philosophy and values. And it was a fairly easy transition for me to, with the support of my board, slide into that position.
So let's talk about your journey, and then we'll get back into leadership style, because how you might differ from a guy like Ed Bonner. Nobody's exactly the same. So talk to us about your journey. How did you end up becoming sheriff? Where did you become from? Early philosophies, and just like how you got here.
Well, I grew up in a little town just up the road, Loomis. Yes. Graduated from Del High School. Go Golden Eagles.
Yes, absolutely.
Football season is upon us.
Without doubt.
I worked out of high school for the California State Park System. My grandfather was a retired state park ranger. So I had seen him model service my entire childhood. He retired, and I kind of followed into that and worked for the state park system. And then I got into construction. When I was in high school, I was really good in math, up into calculus, and I worked for a civil engineering firm. Well, there was an economic downturn. I was married with a young baby, and I said, boy, I don't know if I can feed my family. It was streaky as construction was during that time. And I had a friend of mine who said, you'd probably be good at this. You should take a look. I walked on as a recruit, tested, and never looked back. I never wanted to work anywhere else. I stayed with the sheriff's office the entire time, promoted up through the ranks to assistant sheriff. I became under sheriff in November 2007. Now that's kind of the operational head. Sheriff's the political head, under sheriff's operational head, and he's our executive officer. Well, I know you're keenly aware of what happened shortly after November 2007.
Yes.
Yeah, I got to be the under sheriff that said no. Cut everything. We need to stretch our resources and try as hard as we could not to lay people off. Because people are how we deliver our service. They are, don't get me wrong, they're expensive. We know that. We don't take that for granted. But they're also our method to deliver service to our community. So we just didn't want to lay anybody off. We didn't have to. And
I remember, and I might talk about this if there's time at the end of the show, about the financial crisis and how that changed my life, my business life. But my wife was the HR director for the city of Roseville. Yep. And so she was facing some of the same things that you were doing, is like union employees. And, so you can't always just cut the lowest performer in some of these situations, right? Or your hands are somewhat tied at times in a government agency.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. But I was proud of our team. I mean, they were willing. They recognized that this wasn't a made-up, manufactured crisis. And, they did take cuts. And they did everything that they could to tighten the belt and make things last and stretch our resources to the ability that we could. And we got through that, and it's much better now.
How would you compare your leadership style to your predecessor, Ed Bonner?
We're similar in nature. We're both very personable. Very important for us to know our people and be engaged with our people. One of the things that's very important to me.
He's a Del Oro guy too, isn't he?
He is. He is. Class of '68, I believe, and a Berkeley guy. Which,
wow.
I can say. Yeah, going from Loomis to Berkeley, that's a whole different conversation.
That's a culture contrast, yeah.
Berkeley in '68, I understand, was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
That being said, when I'm putting together my team, what I wanted to make sure is most important, obviously you have to have technical competence, but I want people with organizational courage, people that are willing to challenge convention and, frankly, challenge me. I'm not some, all-seeing, all-knowing, omniscient, omnipotent person. I'm a human being, and I need captains and commanders and civilian staff that are willing to look me in the face and go, I don't know about that, boss. Are you sure?
Yeah.
And have the courage to have that conversation.
I wonder, though, how many people are under your command?
Well, if you talk about my direct line of command, I have one assistant and one undersheriff.
Okay, so
we're
they
a paramilitary organization.
It's sounding like an open door policy to those, but there are so many other people under your command, or on staff, if you will. How do they all have access to the man?
I have almost 570 full-time employees, and then probably close to another couple hundred volunteers. my door is open. And they all know that. Also, I go to briefings. I mean, you got to get out of your office, and it's not always easy. I have an inbox, I have meetings, I have things that I have to do in the community. This morning, I was at briefing. You just go engage with your staff, ask them how they're doing, share how things are going with you, share perspectives so that they can understand why the decisions are made that you make. They don't always know. And you always you have to be willing to say, hey, anybody got any questions, and be willing to answer them.
Yeah, you got your
Be honest.
team and you got your customers, it sounds like, as the community with the press briefings. But thinking about something like law enforcement, right? When something bad happens, think back to the situation we talked about at the beginning of the show. You know, something starts in, say, a Sacramento or a neighboring community.
Right.
It could easily escalate and show up in your jurisdiction. You've got to find a way to work cooperatively with the other people around our hometown.
We do.
How do you do that?
Well, no, I can tell you locally, we're absolutely wonderful in that we have a group where all the law enforcement leaders, we all work together and we all meet monthly. So we have relationships. The time to build a relationship is not during a crisis. You need to have that in place now. So we work on building those relationships, and then when something happens, man, I'm a text, a phone call away. We already have those relationships. As far as our partners, yes, I know Sheriff Jones very well. Daniel Hahn, the former chief of Roseville, he's on speed dial. I know lots of people in the region, and you build relationships. Effectiveness is built through those relationships. You can't do it. You can't build that relationship in an emergency.
Well, Placer County is kind of known as a bastion of it's a great place to live, right?
Yeah.
I know there's tough areas in every community, but Placer County is kind of known for just being a great place to live.
Right.
How do you contrast, like when you get in a room with Daniel Hahn or one of these other folks that maybe are facing gangs and things like that on a larger scale? How do you guys figure out a way to work together? Because that's the kind of stuff drifts over into Placer County too.
It does. The criminals shockingly do not know where the county line is.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, in our county jail system, I have almost 800 inmates, and at any given time, half of them are coming from outside our jurisdiction.
Okay.
We have good stuff to steal. If you want to victimize, you don't necessarily go to a poor community. You go to Roseville, you go to Granite Bay. So the problems don't know where the lines are. It is all about scale, and we speak the same language. And the fact that Daniel has a different community down there that he has to relate to, we speak the same language, and I can understand the issues that he's going through. And he's called me with issues, and I've called him. Same thing with Sheriff Jones.
Yeah, I'm thinking about gun ownership too. This sort of it kind of makes me think about owning a weapon. My wife's out of town, so my bodyguard is out of town right now. So I'm sleeping with my two best friends, Smith and Wesson. But all of my buddies, I don't have a concealed weapons permit, but a lot of entrepreneurs have these concealed weapons permit. How tough is that to get? And what's the value? I mean, do you when do you recommend that being a time to go get that kind of thing?
Okay, in Placer County, pretty easy.
Okay.
The criminal justice landscape has shifted significantly over the years. Some of the decisions in Sacramento, AB 109, prison realignment, Prop 63, Prop 47, these things have shifted, and we have fewer. Our jail system can hold. We're holding people, more sophisticated people, for longer periods of time. Unfortunately, what that also means is I don't have as many beds available, and there is a greater criminal element on the street, coupled with reduced resources and longer response times. I don't think any sheriff should stand in between a good law-abiding citizen and their ability to protect themselves by carrying a concealed weapon. Yeah. So personal protection, in my mind, is sufficient just cause.
Yeah. I'm on my way to go get that concealed weapons permit, because you know what? It does feel like in this day and age, I hate to say it, sound like an old man, but in this day and age, it's. I guess I am an old man, but you need to be thinking that way. And it's all about freedom. So thinking about just the future of law enforcement and the future of Placer County. If you were to pull out the crystal ball, I mean, what do you imagine in the future?
I think we're going to have to be more effective with resources. We're going to have to leverage those relationships even more effectively. The other thing is, Sacramento does drive policy, and we're going to have to figure out, and we're all struggling with this right now, what is the right size of a jail? I don't know. We're still working on that. I can tell you this, if you have more people out on probation, there has to be a predictable consequence when they screw up.
Okay.
And they do. And that consequence is flash incarceration in jail. But if your jail's full of beds, there's no teeth in probation. If there's no teeth in probation, then what is the point? Things start to break down and the system starts to back up. So we're going to have to look at the jail is the cornerstone of the criminal justice system. We have to right size them and make sure that that we have the right number of beds and the right type of beds to make sure the system works properly.
Well, what ideas are on the horizon? Is there anything being contemplated to face this, or is it? I mean, what can we expect? When will we hit rock bottom and then make the turnaround?
And that's going to be a challenge. One of the things that we're doing locally that we're also struggling with is mental health. We've got a grant, and we're going to do a mental health wing so that we can appropriately house those folks and get them the treatment that they need so that they can return to competency and hopefully productive life. Man, I wish I had all the answers for you. I really don't. I can tell you the things that I see. We are the receptacle for mental health. Homelessness is going to be an issue. It's a challenge that law enforcement has to face every single day. We didn't create the problem, but we're who answers the phone when people call. Yeah. And we're kind of caught in the middle of having to be compassionate and empathetic and get people the services that they need, but not be too rough about it.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge that we're all facing.
So let's share some closing thoughts about leadership, right? You obviously, as I call it the leadership pipeline, right? So you start off, you got to be able to manage yourself, lead yourself, then you're managing others, then you're leading, larger groups, maybe even divisions, and in something like the Placer County Sheriff's Department, right? You have a large organization that you're leading. So thinking about, so you do some coaching, right? At some point, you're coaching leaders to lead divisions. Give us some words of wisdom about how to approach leadership for a young entrepreneur. Maybe it's a new manager. How should we be thinking about leadership?
Okay. First off, encourage creativity. I have to recognize as a leader that there are many ways to solve a problem. My job is to establish where the ditches are on the roadway and give them proper motivation to move along that roadway through encouragement, through coaching, through training, make sure that they're moving, but recognize that there are more than one way. My way may not be the only way. There are other ways to get things done. Never tell a person don't tell them how to do something. Tell them what you need done and allow them to surprise you with their ingenuity. As long as they're within operational parameters. We have a tendency to over-coach and over-direct and not allow people the creativity that they need to actually solve problems. And you know what? When they're working and they're solving it on their own, then they're invested in the outcome as well. Yeah. They're not implementing your plan. They're implementing their plan. So allow people the creativity and the freedom to solve their own problems.
Lessons of leadership from Devon Bell, Placer County Sheriff. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for bringing the empathy, the courage, the humility to this job that we all respect so much. Don't change the station, because after the break, we will be talking to Allison Joy, the rising rock star in the Sacramento media landscape. I am the entrepreneur next door, and this is the Mark Haney Show.